I'm so crazy, but we're just going green. People think we're so crazy, but we're just going green. People think that we're so crazy, we're just going green. People think that we're so crazy, we're just going green. Sabadi, I'm in Thailand, hanging out with Nick, yeah, he's my main man. Check it out, Eddie's got guitar. I'm gonna rap so far and freestyle for a little while. That's what I'm gonna do, and hopefully you enjoy it. This is so fun, we're on the air. Oops, I forgot to pay for my taxi fare. You think I'm joking? I ain't being sarcastic. Don't remember to recycle your plastic. Check it out, I'm gonna leave by saying what's up, and also cup kun cup. Yeah, cup kun cup. Yeah, cup kun cup. Yeah, let's bring back the chorus. Yeah. Think that I'm so crazy, but I'm just going green. People think I'm so crazy, but we're just going green. People think I'm so crazy, but I'm just going green. People think that I'm so crazy, I'm just going green.
And indeed, people think I'm so crazy, but I'm just going green. This is Nick Anthony, and this is the Going Green Show. Tonight's show is show number 49, and I'd like to wish all at the Phuket News and Live 89.5 a happy first birthday, which is this weekend. I had the pleasure of joining the team on about week number 2 or week number 3, all those many months ago, and it's been a fantastic journey for the radio station, and it's great to see them consistently coming up with new content, new formats, and driving new audiences. So well done to both the Phuket News team and Live 89.5. Tonight, I'm going to be talking about a new environmentalism. In short, environmentalism is in crisis, and like all crises, it demands a different response to those that have been tried and proved wanting in the past. I'll also tonight be discussing local news, including the print edition of this week's The Phuket News. There's an excellent article from Kanakwan Kunok at Sikh, who talks about flooding and the responses to flooding locally. And we'll be looking at international news, including the dolphin slaughter and issues up in Taiji in Japan, Siemens pulling out of solar globally, selling their business, and other interesting international news. Let's take a look at environmentalism, which is going to be our show tonight. I did last week, before I move on to that, I talked about floods to famines and how extremes are becoming the new normal. Thailand is now moving from flooding to droughts, with our rainy season coming to an end, and with that, new problems arise. Well, this is the new. Weather extremes, seasons out of sync, and more to come. One of my favourite journalists, George Monbiot of The Guardian, thinks we have made a mistake whose consequences would be hard to overstate. He thinks that the forecasts for world food production could be entirely wrong. Perhaps there is no normal anymore. Perhaps the smooth, average, warming trends that the climate models predict, simultaneously terrifying and oddly reassuring, mask wild extremes for which no farmer can plan and to which no farmer can respond. So where does that leave a world which must either keep raising production or starve? Well, The Guardian has a program which they've been writing about called 50 Months to Avert a Crisis. This comes on the heels of 100 months to avert a crisis, and indeed we're halfway through. Many more people describe the huge opportunities for economic recovery and better lives that could come from a great transition to a low-carbon, high well-being economy, but which are currently going begging. Change is in the air in spite of the current official blind spot and an attempt to return to business as usual, or even go backwards. Why, for example, do we encourage the oil industry with tax breaks when we know that to avoid runaway climate change, we can only afford to burn around a fifth of the fossil fuels left in the ground, making the balance unburnable? What we do in the next 50 months is not a choice between what we have done in the past and what we are doing today. It's an invitation to embark on the most extraordinary, exhilarating, and challenging adventure our society has yet faced. learning how to thrive without disastrously destabilizing the climate on which we depend. Every step matters, and it matters most that we start walking.
Let the music take control.
Phuket's Live 89.5.
Your island, your station.
Powered by the Phuket News.
Welcome back to the Going Green Show. Actually, this Going Green Show 3 till 5 p.m. We have changed the time slot as of 2 weeks ago. So do tune in on a regular Saturday basis. Okay, tonight we're talking about a new environmentalism. There was a great article written by James Murray, who is the editor at Business Green, which is a UK-based environmental group, and indeed a Business Green group. And he suggests an approach that we've actually been taking here on Phuket with a local NGO called Seek. You can find out information about them at the website www.myseek.org. James says that, and I'll be paraphrasing through this section, that there is a serious hope deficit at the heart of the modern environmental movement, creating a vacuum that has been filled by so-called neo-environmentalists, who are unashamedly pro-business, subscribe to failed Wellesian techno-optimism, speak the language of money and power, beloved of the neoliberal movement, and are obsessed with placing human values on nature. They're also overly fixated on climate change and kidding themselves if they think they can halt or even slow the global industrial machine and its continued destruction of the planet. Well, indeed, it is environmentalism in crisis. As evidenced, as I discussed earlier, by the recent transition of the 100 Months to Save the World campaign into what is now 50 Months to Save the World initiative, green business success stories, billions of dollars in clean tech investment, and a broadening awareness that climate change impacts are worsening are having next to no impact on global greenhouse gas emissions. After a brief Lehman Brothers-induced hiatus in 2008 with the global crisis, global emissions are in fact rising again, and they're rising fast. Moreover, while the clean tech revolution remains the biggest untold business story of our times, the impact of an economic slump that is entering its 5th year in many industrialized economies means few countries are sufficiently focused on the need to decarbonize. In the latest figures from Bloomberg New Energy Finance, if they're indeed accurate, clean energy investment could even fall for the first time this year. As articulate climate scientists such as Tyndall Center's Professor Kevin Anderson are increasingly willing to point out, the outlook is pretty bleak. The chances of avoiding global average temperature increases of more than 2 degrees centigrade, as agreed by the international community, have all but disappeared. Once that 2-degree mark is breached and natural greenhouse gas feedback start to kick in, all bets are off as to the scale and the severity of the climate impacts that will result. Serious voices warn that without some form of highly risky geoengineering breakthrough, the world is going to become a very hostile and unstable place over the next few decades. Add in far less high-profile crises such as ocean acidification and biodiversity loss, and it's easy to understand why hard-headed risk analysis undertaken by notorious environmentalists such as the US military and the global insurance industry can send a shiver down your spine. We sometimes joke at Business Green, says James, that we need an office apocalypse correspondent. It's not really a joking matter, particularly when climate impacts are already driving up food prices and pushing millions of people around the world towards famine. Environmentalists of all shades, be they old-school eco-warriors or chief sustainability officers at multinational firms, are being forced to admit that, despite some impressive localized victories, their campaigns are not working, or at least not working quickly enough. For all the investment in cutting-edge clean technologies, the popular support of vast swathes of society, and the political rhetoric committing to urgent action, greener economic models are not cutting through into the mainstream at the pace that is required. In short, environmentalism is in crisis. And like all crises, it demands a different response to those that have been tried and proved wanting in the past. James suggests that indeed there is a new environmentalism at hand. The primary response to this crisis has been the emergence of a form of new environmentalism, characterized by an optimistic hope that technology and innovation can help us alleviate the environmental challenges we face. We may see the development of green business models and technologies as the primary route towards a more sustainable economy, but we are not as dismissive of traditional green thinking and its emphasis on limits and transforming societal values. It is rooted in the kind of behavior change old-school environmentalists have been trying to instigate, largely unsuccessfully, for decades. We do understand essential environmental limits and want to find a new way of operating within them by re-engineering GDP and other economic indicators to eventually support a stable, closed-loop economy. We want to gradually transform societal values to promote more livable, localized communities and shared, efficient consumption. Where technology is harnessed in this context, it is used to fundamentally transform unsustainable business models through dematerialization of products or video conferencing meetings, for example, as a replacement for air travel, to name just two examples. To suggest new environmentalism is designed to make people feel comfortable about their plane flights and their iPads completely ignores how nervous some of the world's less adaptable businesses are about the threat posed by emerging lower consumption and lower impact business models. The new environmentalism is pro-business, but it's a very different sort of business to the business as usual approach. This is Nick Anthony, and you're on Going Green number 49.
Phuket's Live 89.5.
Your island, your station.
Powered by the Phuket News.
And indeed, that is what many environmentalists have been looking for the last 20 years, maybe even longer. They just need a miracle. They just need the government to say, this is how we're going to do it. This is how we're going to decarbonize our economy. These are the measures we're going to put in place to make it an ideal place to live, an ideal place to grow up. Healthy environment, healthy water, healthy seas, healthy beaches. However, that hasn't been the case. Indeed, old-school environmentalism was on much of the right course that we're doing today, and that is community grassroots involvement. However, the approach working top-down through government, although it has to be done and governments do have to change, has unfortunately left these major decisions to governments to put these individual actions in place. And there's been a 20-year gap, and as we've just heard in the show earlier, there is a new environmental movement which is pro-business, but it's a very different sort of business to the business-as-usual approach. We're not naive about the dubious track record of many businesses, including many of those that are now leading the development of the green economy. Businesses have been guilty of many of the atrocities old-school environmentalists have accused them of. There can be no justification for the short-sighted self-interest of many corporations and the catastrophic environmental damage that they have caused. There is worrying evidence to suggest the pace of innovation has stalled in recent decades, with only a handful of industries delivering game-changing new technologies, while too many firms focus on incremental improvements. The internal combustion engine and the energy grid, for example, are recognizably much the same today as they were 100 years ago, while the past 20 years has failed to emulate the widespread technological changes that dominated the first half of the 20th century. But as the great industrial, consumer, and digital revolutions have proven in the past, businesses are capable of developing and deploying new technologies at a breakneck pace when conditions are right. The key question for critics of new environmentalism is, where else is the innovation going to come from to tackle environmental challenges and protect the poorest and most vulnerable in our societies from the consequences of our mistakes over the past 150 years, if not from businesses. Ultimately, businesses are no more a homogeneous community than any other human grouping. They're nothing more or less than teams of people, and as such, they are capable of the full range of human behavior, from the inspiring to the depressing. New environmentalists want to work with and within businesses to drive the development of a sustainable global economy. But that does not make them apologists for those regressive businesses still undermining this vision. What we need is a new environmental manifesto. Last year, Business Green, which is a UK website and magazine, and indeed the author of this article I've been talking tonight is the editor of Business Green, they made an imperfect attempt, as they call it, at defining the values progressive, sustainable businesses should ascribe to. The tenets set out remain necessarily vague, but they are a reasonable starting point for assessing where most green businesses, and by extension new environmentalists, stand. It's worth quoting the Charter. We recognize that business, as usual, is unsustainable. We will develop new business models that take account of environmental constraints. We are attempting to manage the risks posed by climate change and ecological degradation. We accept that we have environmental impacts and will strive to reduce them. We acknowledge that good regulations and policies will play a crucial role in the development of the low-carbon economy. We understand that the short-term costs associated with green measures will deliver long-term benefits. We know that the low-carbon economy will deliver countless commercial opportunities. And we are striving to build a green economy by harnessing what businesses do best, investing and innovating on behalf of our stakeholders, customers, and society as a whole. Precise policy positions and technology preferences are still being hammered out as the evidence evolves, often through fierce argument and failed experiments. But at the moment, it's impossible to declare a firm, detailed, and comprehensive new environmentalist position on complex issues such as carbon pricing or geoengineering, just as older environmentalists never resolved internal tensions over nuclear power or GM crops. But while these values may be vague, there is a suite of underlying principles that all new environmentalists would accept. We are anti-business as usual, but unashamedly supportive of progressive and sustainable business models, as well as responsible forms of capitalism. It is also inherently optimistic and technocentric, but most of all, it's highly pragmatic. It's based on nothing more or less than a cold-headed assessment of the environmental risks we face and an evidence-based analysis of potential solutions. In this respect, it is not so much a new form of environmentalism, but a simple re-embracing of Enlightenment values and business best practices. It is this pragmatism that is currently driving the next phase of the new environmentalism, a shift from conceptual philosophizing to technological deployment. As environmental risks and climate change impacts intensify even further, it is blindingly apparent that the new environmentalism must be about action, not endless debate. It might not command the headlines it deserves, but this action is now taking place all around the world. Stay tuned. After the news, I'll be back to talk about how action is taking place here on our island and how new environmentalism as a movement is already taking place and is starting to transform our island in the most positive of ways. This is Nick Anthony on The Going Green Show. I hope you enjoyed tonight's show.
People think I'm so crazy, but we're just going green. People think we're so crazy, but we're just going green. People think that we're so crazy, we're just going green. People think that we're so crazy, we're just going green.
And it's a big happy birthday this weekend to 89.5 on its 1-year anniversary. Great work from the team here at 89.5, and of course from the Phuket News newspaper, which provides a lot of content, provides us with extra coverage, gives us fantastic communication to everybody out there, and I think together makes a fantastic team. Tonight I've been talking about a new environmentalism, the old school environmentalism of big picture thinking, carbon capture, changing government's views. It has been tried for 20 years with some very effective changes. However, not enough changes at getting down to a grassroots level, a grassroots movement. James Murray, who's the editor at Business Green, a magazine and website and blog in London, this week wrote a very good article about new environmentalism that I've been reading from and paraphrasing tonight. And I'm going to, in this second hour, look at action that needs to take place. His suggestion is that the new environmental movement is one of action. In fact, as environmental risks and climate change impacts intensify even further, it's now blindingly apparent that the new environmentalism must be about action, not endless debate. It might not command the headlines it deserves, but this action is now taking place all around the world. Here on Phuket, I've had the pleasure of being involved with a startup NGO called Seek. You can find the information at www.myseek.org. Also on that page, you'll see a click to today's radio show, where I have all of tonight's text and also some videos that I'll play for you a little later. But on there, you can find information about climate change, about renewable energy. You'll find out information from big picture columnists and bloggers, as well as NGOs, and you'll find, importantly, local action. And Seek is all about bringing action to local areas. For example, in Kamala, we have the Kamala Green Club that we've been heavily involved in advising. They're now working with all of the hotels, working with the local businesses, and working with the Orbitor to make Kamala a better local community, make it a renewable community, make it a sustainable community. Renewables, of course, have been the primary energy investment category globally, with multinationals from Unilever to GE, from Nike to IBM, investing billions in the rapid development of cutting-edge clean technologies. And this deployment phase is not yet happening quickly enough. But it's already evident in the integration of solar panels and electric cars into our cityscapes, just as it is in the continued expansion of green investment funds and environmental policies. All the evidence points to an acceleration of this trend, with countries as diverse as the UK and South Korea, Brazil and Japan, and even India and China embracing strategies that will support the rapid rollout of increasingly mature and cost-effective low-carbon infrastructure during the second half of this decade. A recent debate hosted by the 50 Months and Counting initiative stressed this focus on action, highlighting the need for clear and targeted action over the next 4 years designed to lay the foundations for a full-blown, low-carbon transformation of all of our economies. The nature of this action may vary from community-level renewables or efficiency projects to political funding reform and a fundamental rethink of consumption patterns. But it is all designed to accelerate the emergence of sustainable economic models and a desire to build a more localized environmentalism. Perhaps it's time to go back to basics, says a Mr. Kingsnorth. So we might learn what grows wild in our local area and whether we can eat it. We might build up a bank of practical skills, from horticulture to land management. We might go out at night and plant seeds in vacant flower beds near where we live. We might work on small-scale engineering projects, from water purification technologies to micro solar panels. We might work to save bees, or butterflies, or water meadows, or woodlands, or playing fields that we know and have a relationship with. We might walk in the hills or along the Klong, or in the local waste ground, get to know our place and how it works. It's about getting the message right. The challenge for the new environmentalist is how best to disseminate the values and galvanize action at a global scale and at a breakneck pace. The new environmentalism needs a simple and unequivocal strategic vision that can then enable no more than 4 or 5 core messages. All messages should be framed with the understanding that protecting the planet is actually about improving quality of life for everyone. And then you have the foundations for the 4 or 5 key messages that should support all green campaigns, products, and business models. Namely, clean technologies are better, not just greener. Energy efficiency and renewables deliver lower operating costs. Greener communities and businesses are cleaner, safer, and more comfortable than what we put up with currently. And that low carbon investment delivers jobs and economic growth. And if you want to scare people that more sustainable business models help protect us against existential climate change, threats, and energy insecurity, well, that also does the job. New environmentalists need to be fixated on presenting these positive arguments wherever we can. This is Nick Anthony, and you're learning tonight about new environmentalism. Stay tuned, I'll be back.
Phuket Live 89.5.
Your island, your station.
Powered by the Phuket News.
Welcome back to Going Green Show number 49. I'm talking today about new environmentalism and a report, an article put out by James Murray, who's the editor of Business Green, a UK magazine and website. You can find it at www.businessgreen.com. And we've been talking about how new environmentalists are indeed now much more focused on action than indeed talk. Talk is cheap, talk is slow, and indeed debate is necessary. However, in many Western countries, debate and the corresponding delays through implementation have cost the globe 20 years of effective inaction when it comes to pollution, ocean acidification, global warming, and the destruction of places such as Africa, Latin America, and indeed here in Asia with Thai forests, Cambodian forests, and in China with the massive destruction of all of their local environments, putting at risk, even in China now, 70% of Chinese fishermen as a result of overfishing. So it's getting to a point where it's going to become unsustainable, and action has to change this. Well, we've been saying that it's really time to get back to basics. It's time to get back to knowing our local environment so that we can build up a bank of practical skills, so that we learn what grows in the wild and in our local area and whether we can eat it. Indeed, we might start working on small-scale engineering projects from water purification to micro solar panels. Get local and get active. The new challenge now for new environmentalism is how best to communicate this to a local level. Well, new environmentalists are now fixated on presenting these positive arguments wherever we can. Despite a receptive audience, if we are to be successful, our strategic vision has to be backed by a ground war that is entirely focused on the rapid deployment of green technologies and business models. It's all about deployment, deployment, and deployment. We should be much prouder of the progress that has been made and is being made, and be much more willing to fight to advance it. Environmentalism has secured many important victories, but attempts to deliver international climate change treaties, forge a new economic settlement that takes account of sustainability, the protection of globally significant habitats, and scare the public and politicians into action, have all ultimately failed. It is only by embracing a new environmentalism that we will have any hope of tackling the daunting environmental challenges we now face, while still delivering the improved economies and societies that we all want, regardless of political or ideological affiliation. New environmentalism is here. It's real, and most of all, it is working. A new road is being forged for the environmental movement. And to slightly misquote Bob Dylan, the times are a-changing. Now is the moment to get involved. Now is the moment to speak up, to get down the beaches and help pick up plastic, to make sure that the environment is clean, and to do your bit for a better future for us here on Phuket and a better future for our planet. This is Nick Anthony.
Phuket's Live 89.5.
Your island, your station.
Powered by the Phuket News.
Welcome back to the Going Green Show. We're on show number 49, and tonight talking about a new environmental movement around the world which is more action-based and more localized. And indeed, here on the island for the last 3 years, there's been a complete change of attitudes from all local communities. Waste, which for many years felt like an octopus. It had too many arms, too many tentacles, and was simply too slippery to get hold of. You'd grab it one way, it would squeeze the other. You'd take waste out of one place and it would pop up in another place. You'd say no dumping here, and there'd be dumping there. No littering here, and there'd be littering there. It was a very, very difficult process to pull together. However, I'm pleased to say that the government, local government, with local operators and local communities, for the first time in the last 6 months, have really started to get their hands around the waste management issue. And the first thing that's been happening has been, you'll notice on the roadsides these days, they're much cleaner. And that is because twice a month, they go through and they pick up the trash before they cut the grass. A very simple thing, you might say, but it has transformed the look and feel of all of the local communities. At the same time, the reduction in that roadside litter, I believe, through cleanups we've been doing up and down the West Coast, is already reducing the amount of plastic, which has been combined with a reduce and reuse campaign, has reduced the amount of plastic on our West Coast beaches possibly by as much as 70%. There's barely been a day this year where we saw the sort of trash that came up in 2008, 2009, where literally we had blankets of plastic bags along beaches. And in some cleanups on Surin Beach, for example, we would collect upwards of 70 or 80 trash bags of garbage. I think on our worst days on Surin Beach, we've perhaps picked up 20. So there is already a dramatic reduction in trash. The other thing that's been playing into our hand is more regular cleanups. It's groups like the Kamala Green Club, which you can find on Facebook, that have been very proactive this year at organizing, orchestrating, and indeed getting involved to promote it within the community to ensure that its success, a beach cleaning program. And the next beach cleanup will be on the 30th, which is on Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. down by the temple, and at 10 o'clock up on the north end, up near Skylar Bar. So if you're around Tuesday morning, pop on down to Kamala Beach and give it a clean, or indeed just get out onto your local beach with a plastic bag, grab a few friends, and get involved in a cleanup. On the 1st of November on Bang Tao, there's also a large cleanup organised at all points from Lian through to the Reggae Bar in front of Laguna, down south in front of Dala Resort, and in the very tip in front of Amman Cruise. So big cleanup also on Bang Tao. With the winds now coming from a easterly direction, actually the beaches are pretty good. There's not much trash these days, and if there is any litter or any overflow from the bins, with the wind coming from the east, actually it's now blowing it into the ocean and is being blown out to the Indian Ocean. So even now we must be even more vigilant of garbage bins, garbage bin overflows, and continue a process of education about litter and an anti-litter campaign. On the December 16th coming up. That's in about 6 weeks. There's a very large, big cleanup day happening in Patong, organised by the Patong Tesoban. They will coordinate all of the hotels, businesses, junk salon, and the hotels behind to do a huge cleanup on Patong. I drove through there early this morning. I saw at least 5 cleanup crews around the roadsides and on the beach road. They were sweeping. They were putting out extra bins, and indeed I must say Patong is looking pretty good. On December the 16th there'll also be an underwater cleanup looking after the Patong Bay, and that will be done in conjunction with local NGO Seek. As the event gets closer, you'll be able to go to myseek.org, and it will have details on that Patong big cleanup day. Well, Seek's been working on compass indicators, which is a group called Atkinson, based out of Sweden, that has come up with a set of indicators that give a good reference to sustainability, and sustainability on a local level. The compass, using N for nature, E for economy, S for society, and W for well-being, is a good way of pulling all of these different issues together and putting them into the context of health and safety, and indeed a positive, sustainable future. Every week we look at the Phuket News print edition, and today's paper has a couple of articles that do pertain to the compass indicators, one of which on page 3 is talking about protected areas, and that is the ongoing investigations into the Siranad National Park. There's been 366 new investigators hired who've been formed into 36 teams. They arrive on Monday next week and will have responsibility for checking 379 land titles covering 3,000 rai, or just over 1,000 acres. The teams will have 10 days to conclude their information gathering, then will make their reporting within a month. Also, looking at nature on page 7, there's an article about Surin Beach sustainability. I was involved in March with a sustainable workshop for the day with the Chengtele Orbitor, and that was a great session looking at the mapping of the future, how to deal with waste, how to deal with encroachment, the taking down of billboards, which has already happened, the issues with illegal encroachment, such as Playa Restaurant on the beach, which had been slated for demolishment, but was delayed through higher-ups that said, do not touch it, the seawall is legal. Well, the local Orbitor has spoken with the governor and is making a new concerted effort to clean up Surin Beach. Parts of it has been privatised, and the Orbitor is keen to take it back. It is a public beach and should be maintained as a public beach. If it is completely privatised, then Surin Beach will not be accessible to locals and will cost you 500 to 1,500 baht for the pleasure of enjoying this public space. On page 4 of this week's edition is a very good article from Kun Nok, who's with Seek. Previously, she was with the Thai Environment Institute in Bangkok. She's a ranger and a very great asset for us here on Phuket. She gives every couple of weeks an article on a Thai point of view, and she very straight talking and says it as it is. In this week's edition, she gives a great summary of how to solve the flooding problems. And whilst there have been recent positive measures to solve flooding, more needs to be done. She looks at upstream flooding and ways to prevent land encroachment and reduce the speed of runoff to the lowlands. Midstream water requires better drainage systems, more detention basins, and better urban planning. Downstream water needs better water quality control before being diverted to the ocean. Construction sites have been singled out for requiring better silt and runoff management, and households, schools and markets require stronger education, a litter program, a continuation of the reduce and reuse program with recycling programs. That's something that's now coming from the Orbitors. It's coming from Kun Pai Boon, who is the Orbijor, who's about to start a litter bug campaign. And also it's happening at the top level with the governor and indeed the health ministry, who will be combining environmental education and environmental health with their own health and safety campaigns. that very much aimed at the education of youngsters in Phuket. And of course, it's with the kids that our future lies, and it's for the kids that we make our future better. Whilst looking at economy, on page 4 of the paper, the Phuket Vegetarian Festival wrapped up last Tuesday with the final parade and final parade and fireworks walking in a huge, noisy procession. It was a great event every final day of the Vegetarian Festival, where hundreds of people will walk over hot coals that are usually about 30 meters long. A great event to be a part of. And next month, Yingluck will be, the Prime Minister will be here in Phuket, launching what has been a continued campaign, as you heard in the local news earlier, to support cultural tourism, something that Phuket is very strong at and should be supported and indeed communicated better. Also, whilst looking at the paper, in the lifestyle section on page 2, local resident John Underwood, who's the king of recycling, turns other people's trash into works of art and then displays those in hotels all around the world. If you're running through Bypass Road, do drop in and see John or check out his studio. It's about halfway as you're coming in from Royal Phuket Marina to the Tesco Lotus and the 89.5 studio on the left-hand side. There is a restaurant for lunch, and also he has excellent coffee. That's the John Underwood Art Studio. Do feel free to pop in and check it out. And lastly, looking at the newspaper, the U.S. Navy has last week conducted its 100th community service project. Well done, guys. And a big thanks to Brad Kenny and the Patong Rotary, who for 6 years has organised community projects with visiting U.S. Navy boats here on R&R. This last week, volunteers supported the Life Home Project, who, after the tsunami, took on 26 tsunami orphans, and they also, the Navy were involved with a school painting project in Kok Loi in Phang Nga Province. And as I mentioned, Kamala Green Club, 2 cleanups going on this week on Tuesday. Get down to the beach on Tuesday morning, 9 a.m. down in front of the temple, and 10 o'clock on the north end.
Phuket's Live 89.5.
Your island, your station.
Powered by the Phuket News.
They're out again. Of course, 3 to 5 is our new time slots here on Saturday. Okay, as a wrap for tonight, 2 brief clips I'm going to play for you. Finally, last night, there was a break in the climate silence that's been taking place with the U.S. elections. MTV, actually doing an interview on President Obama, broke the climate silence. Let's take a listen, and then I'll play a brief transcript from David Attenborough, who also weighs in on the climate silence with respect to the presidential elections and why America is not doing enough.
Until this year, global climate change has been discussed in every presidential debate since 1988. It was a big part of your previous campaign, but has been pushed back to on the back burner. Given the urgency of the threat, do you feel that we're moving quickly enough on this issue? Number 1, and Samantha from New Jersey wants to know, what will you do to make it a priority?
Well, the answer is, number 1, we're not moving as fast as we need to. And this is an issue that future generations, MTV viewers, are going to have to be dealing with even more than the older generation is. And so this is a critical issue. And there's a huge contrast in this campaign between myself and Governor Romney. I'm surprised it didn't come up in one of the debates. Governor Romney says he believes in climate change. That's different than a lot of the members of his own party who just deny it completely. But he says he's not sure that man-made causes are the reason. I believe scientists who say that we're putting too much carbon emissions into the atmosphere, and it's heating the planet, and it's going to have a severe effect. So there are a couple things that we have already done over the last 4 years. Number 1, we doubled fuel efficiency standards on cars and trucks. That's the first increase in 30 years in the fuel mileage standards. And as a consequence, we'll be taking huge amounts of carbon out of the atmosphere, even as we're also saving folks money at the pump and reducing our dependence on foreign oil. We've doubled clean energy production, wind, solar, biofuels, and that means that increasingly people are getting electricity. Companies are generating power without the use of carbon producing fuels, and that's helping as well. The next step is to
There you go, President Obama. They're talking with MTV in the White House, and a good comment, and about time that climate silence was indeed broken. Let's go back now to David Attenborough, who is interviewed by The Guardian, and hear what he's got to say. Is the loss of sea ice worse than scientists are predicting, is the question.
I think scientists very properly have been shy or cautious about scaremongering, and that's absolutely right and proper. So that if anything, they have underrepresented the dangers that in recent weeks the mechanics of melting glaciers has become more publicized, and suddenly people realize that it's not just as whether it gets warmer at the top. The complexity in which warm meltwater will actually flow down through holes and erode the glacier from the inside it and lubricate the floor of it. Suddenly you begin to realize, yes, glaciology is rather more complex than we thought, and that we are now understanding it in more detail and realizing that actually the situation is worse than we thought.
What will it take to wake people up about climate change?
Disaster. I mean, it's a terrible thing to say, isn't it? And even disaster doesn't alter to do it. I mean, goodness me, there have been disasters in North America with hurricanes and one thing and another, and floods, and yet still people deny it, and it's always got nothing to do with climate change. It visibly has got to do with climate change. For the very first time in the history of Homo sapiens, we are asking people of different cultures in different continents, with different languages, with different moral systems, to agree. Well, that's never happened in the history of humanity, and we can't suppose that it's going to happen just overnight, and we just have to keep at it and hope that the facts will be incontrovertible and be convincing in themselves. One shouldn't scaremonger. I mean, you don't need to scaremonger. The facts are alarming enough without scaremongering.
After 60 years as a naturalist, have you witnessed habitats disappear?
Since my job is to make films about the natural world, I go to where the natural world is flourishing rather than where it's been badly treated. But I was in Borneo last year, and I went up a river which I've travelled on 50 years ago, and by the side of the river, for about 50 yards on the side, there's rainforest, little garret, but beyond it, for mile after mile after mile, there's nothing but oil palms. And of course it's all very well for us to say how dreadful that is, but the fact is the reason there are oil palms is that there is a world hunger for oil palms. The population, the human population has grown so enormously. You know, there are 3 times as many people on this planet as there were when I started making natural history programs. It was huge growth, and they need to be fed, and the people in Borneo are responding to that requirement, and so knocking down the rainforest and growing oil palms. But that's a straightforward consequence of population growth.
David, how do we solve the population problem?
The only way I can think of it, think about it, is by giving women the rights to control their own bodies and to control how many children they have. And in every circumstance where women have that right, where they have the vote, where there are proper medical facilities, where they are literate, and where they are given the choice, the birth rate falls.
There we are. David Attenborough, very good comments there. And as you heard from from President Obama talking to MTV. Climate silence has been broken. That's about it for my show tonight. I'll leave you just with a couple of comments, and of course there is a number of steps that we can take locally. Actions do speak louder than words, and the first step is to be aware. Second is to reflect, think about your actions. Refuse single-use plastic bags, straws and polystyrene. Reduce your waste, reuse what you can, and recycle as much of what's left. Be responsible to Phuket and be responsible to our planet. Well, the show must go on, and this afternoon, coming up now at 5 p.m, you have the best of breakfast with Sam and Natasha. And then this evening, Steve and Sarah have a great show, 7 till 10 p.m, which is dance anthems. And then we have Saturday Night Fever going from 10 till midnight. Coming on tomorrow, Jayla Shark will be back with Weekend Brunch. That'll be from 10 till 1 p.m. The Spin with Tim Newton will be on from 1 till 4 with a highly original program. And from there we have Jason Wilder back in the studio with his international chart show. That's the top 40 from 4 to 7. Then we have Saturday Night Chill, some cool tunes from 7 to 10. And again, non-stop music through to Monday. That's it for the Saturday Going Green Show. This number 49, and indeed happy birthday 89.5 on the 1-year anniversary. Do enjoy your evening. Get back out on the beach and have a swim. It's a beautiful day out there, and make the most of it. High season is coming. Nick Anthony signing out.
Phuket's Live 89.5.
Your island, your station.
Powered by the Phuket News.